Hello. Now, before we get back to the guitar building, I am going to revisit this fast track sharpening system. Basically because the company that makes this has asked me to do so. They didn't like my original review. Now, I stand by that review. Go watch the video, but I tried to sharpen a 2-inch chisel on it because basically that was the chisel I had to hand that I needed sharpening, and I didn't get on very well with it at all. This system left some quite deep gouges, grooves, probably the wrong word there, gouge, some deep scratches in the face of it, and I gave up in the end. This kept jamming, and I went and sharpened this by traditional means, and I've ended up with an edge which I'm quite happy with now. Incidentally, let's just talk about what defines a sharp edge. To me, a sharp edge is two polished planes meeting in a line. And what we mean by that, polished, I like to see my chisels polished, but if they're not polished, they're going to have serrations, I guess, in them, and that's not going to produce a perfect finish. Some people might not require that level of sharpening, but you do basically want two flat surfaces meeting at a point. You don't want a burr on it, you don't want any form of edge to that point. It needs to be a perfect point. Now, I got a few comments in that video. A lot of them just calling me an idiot, basically saying I didn't have the experience to use this, and a lot saying that I shouldn't have been trying to put a 25-degree bevel on this, that I should have been putting a 30-degree bevel on it. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute, but let me just address this issue of me being an idiot. I pride myself in my work. If you've seen my videos, the work I do, I believe, is of high quality. I know how to sharpen chisels. But yes, I am not a sight professional. I'm not somebody who uses a chisel every day of the week and needs something that can sharpen their chisels quickly and efficiently or whatever. But equally, I'm probably somebody who requires a greater level of sharpness in my chisel. But the point of me doing a review is I believe I am the sort of person, sort of like a weekend woodworker, if you like, who would buy a system like this and expect it to work. So it's unreasonable to expect people to have a level of training to use this. Maybe people have got experience of woodworking, but you shouldn't need training to use a sharpening system that you pick up at your local DIY store. It should just work. It shouldn't need, it shouldn't need a qualification to get it to work. Let me just talk about that 30-degree bevel business. Somebody tried to explain to me that the reason it didn't work is I was trying to put a 25-degree bevel on this. It should have been a 30-degree bevel. Well, yeah, you can certainly use a 30-degree bevel. Now, the instructions for this claim that a micro bevel, which is what that would be, i.e. it starts off at 25 degrees and then the very last millimetre, maybe even less than that, it just goes to 30 degrees. The instructions claim that that is a sharper chisel. I'd take exception to that. I'd say a 25-degree bevel is sharper, and I see nothing wrong with having a 25-degree bevel on your chisels or plane blades. Certainly a 30-degree bevel will last longer, but the reason it lasts longer is it's blunter. There's more metal at the tip. The two planes are meeting at a greater angle. So there's more material there. It won't wear away so quickly, so the edge lasts longer, but it's not sharper. The lower the bevel, the sharper it is. And I think that a 25-degree bevel is simply a compromise between something that's really sharp and something which will last. And certainly a 30-degree bevel will last longer. I don't think there's anything wrong with a 30-degree bevel, but I also don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to sharpen with a 25-degree bevel. Certainly my plane blades the instructions stamped on the blades, which has been there for decades. I mean, I think my planes are probably 50 years old. It states that it should be sharpened to a 25-degree bevel. So, yeah, right. And before we get on to doing some actual sharpening, let me just show you some of the limitations. We've established that maybe it can't handle a 2-inch chisel. Maybe. I think it should. It maybe with some more care it probably will handle a 2-inch chisel. But let me show you some of the other things that it won't handle. First up, here's my favourite inlay chisel. Most of the work I've been doing recently has been inlay, and it's been using this chisel. Well, clearly you can't use this on here because it's got a round cross section, and the tip doesn't lie flat anyway on the end. So trying to sharpen on this, it just wouldn't work. Here's another inlay chisel, and again you can't get the blade in place. You just can't sharpen that. Equally, anything that's got a curve to it, you can't sharpen. It may be obvious to point this out, but I realise that a lot of my chisels are things like this. I do a lot of carving style work, and this really is only for straight up chisels, and it may be obvious, but you can't sharpen gouges on this. And yes, this is blatantly obvious, but I just need to point out that most of the things that I use on a day-to-day, at least 50% of what I use for guitar making, can't be sharpened on this system. One further thing before we get going. I have not been paid to do this review. Yes, I've been sent some of these extras for free. I don't know how this is going to go, but whatever the results, this is an unbiased assessment of this tool. Maybe I'll change my mind about it. I don't know, but I'm not being paid for this review. Okay? This was the chisel I was going to use for this second appraisal, but I'm now not so sure. It's a fairly standard 1/8 of an inch mortise chisel, but it's not entirely square on the reverse. This is a vintage chisel. It's presumably been forged, and this rear edge isn't perfectly flat, so it sort of moves when held against the end block. As much as I'd like to sharpen this on here, I think I'm going to have to try and find a chisel that's maybe an easier test for this. I'm going to try and sharpen the easiest chisel I can find, so excuse me while I go and try and pick out another one. Okay, here's the chisel I'm gonna use. It's a modern day chisel. It's got a pretty square back end. It sits securely against the edge here, so it's stable. I can't vouch for the angle that it's originally been ground at. You can still see the grind marks in the end, but I have got a pretty good level of sharpness on this. I've got a polish on it. It would be nice if these grind marks disappeared when I sharpen using this. We'll see. The instructions are regularly clean and oil the dovetail sections of the top. I have cleaned it, got all the muck off, and I'm going to use just ordinary 3-in-1 oil, a very old can, and just stick a few drops, well, big dollop of it. Yeah, I guess there as well. Might be a bit too much because I think that's going to spread all over my desk. I keep calling it a desk, bench. Initially I'm going to use the 220 grit plate on the 25-degree angle, just as I did in the original video. 25-degree edge, and that just magnets onto that. So the instructions say to present the chisel and have it up against the edge. place the tool to be sharpened flat side down on the tool recess against either of the shoulders. There is a small amount of float. I'm reading the instructions in case you hadn't realised. There is a small amount of float between the carriage and the base. Take up this float by moving the carriage away from the tool, that way. Move the tool forward until it makes contact with the diamond stone, then hold it firmly in position against the shoulder. Slide the carriage back towards the tool. Well, it is touching the tool, so that instruction doesn't really make, well, you can't do that. So I've made contact with the diamond stone, slide the carriage back towards the tool. Well, note the carriage rises slightly. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, okay, it's come up. All right, okay, that does make sense. Applying gentle pressure against the tool, slide the carriage backwards and forwards while keeping the side of the tool firmly in position. Yeah, it doesn't move very smoothly. Clearly the bevel on this chisel is greater than 25 degrees because it's only contacting the chisel right at the back of the bevel, not at the front, but we'll keep going. Let me just show you that in close-up. Notice how much of the carriage is getting rubbed away on the back here. I don't think the PTFE that's on this is making much of a difference. There's quite a bit of wear occurring on this edge here. I think this is part of the reason why I was getting problems with it jamming, but let's keep going. So we pull it back, push the chisel in, and then push forward. Part of the problem with this that I see is that because the chisel's at this end of the slot, I mean I could hold it here, but then the same would apply. Once you get to about there, the carriage just jams because most of the carriage is off the block. So you can only really use just a small proportion of the little block. So you can't really use sweeping. And oh yeah, and also when you push the chisel in, it also just adds to the problems of the whole thing jamming. So yeah, this isn't doing much to change my mind about the efficiency of this. No, you see that's completely jammed. You mustn't let the carriage go too far off the end, otherwise it just jams. Okay, I've been doing this for 10 minutes, I think. It's very, very physical work. Clearly there's a problem here because there's, I think, just as much material coming off the carriage as there is off the chisel. It's very hot in here, and I'm yeah, this is very hard work. Also, I'm in danger of getting a blister on my hand from the way I'm holding it, so I've either got to go and get some gloves or I've got to try. The trouble is I really need to try and get some purchase against this because it does tend to lock up. It's something to do with the presence of the chisel. I mean, I don't know whether I could be maybe gentler, not push. I mean, the chisel's got to be in contact with it, clearly. So put it that way, put the chisel in contact and then press. Now, maybe that's better. Okay, maybe I'm pushing the chisel in too hard. It doesn't explain all the wear I'm getting here. Yeah, but part of the problem with this is, and it's a criticism you could throw at using a honing gauge, is that I'm going to end up with the right 25-degree bevel, hopefully. But as it stands, I've not actually touched the edge of the chisel yet. I'm still, after 10 minutes, still taking away material from the body of the chisel. So just a warning, if your chisels aren't perfectly honed to begin with, you may get this problem. It might be that at some point I can switch to the 30-degree bevel, but I'd rather establish that 25-degree first and then use the 30-degree as a micro bevel rather than just going for a micro bevel to start off with. Yeah, I think you have to be careful not to push the chisel in and lift up the carriage. I think that's what blocks the carriage. I think you've got to hold the carriage back and down and then push it forward. Yeah, you see now I'm taking material off the carriage at the front. Along here. Still not the smoothest of moving things. Still no closer to getting to the tip of the chisel. Let's keep going. I'm going to take a rest for a bit. This is quite hard work. I'm melting here. It's quite warm in here. I've got to be careful not to allow my thumb to get damaged by this. It's quite a physical process holding the chisel in place. I'm just going to go and have a drink, cool down, and then try this again. I've still got a bit of a way to go. I think progress is slower the more material I've taken off. I still haven't reached the tip of the chisel yet. There's still a couple of millimeters of polish to go before I'm down to what this believes is a 25-degree bevel. I will check the bevel when I've done it, but I'm going to go and have a rest because my thumb's aching. Yes, it's very physical. The edges of this are really quite sharp, and you can see the grooves in my skin here. You've got to be really careful how you hold it. If you can hear that edge in particular, it's if you can hear that scraping edge. Why these edges aren't rounded over, I don't know. I've had to change the way I'm using this because I really do risk getting a blister on here, because holding it like this, that edge pushing into your palm, that is really sharp. But there's no other way of holding it. You've because you're pushing that way, you've kind of got to grab it by these sharp edges. So I mean, they're not, well, yeah, they are sharp. There's no bevel to them at all. They are a 90-degree perfectly sharp edge because they're two planes meeting in a straight line. So I probably should take a file to these or sandpaper and probably take the edge off them, and that would make it more comfortable to use. Another issue is holding your thumb against the blade. It's when I'm taking quite a lot of material away from this. I probably should have just started at 30 degrees, but I wanted to try this idea of a micro bevel, so I am going to do this as 30 degrees. But it's taking such a long time. This is a very physical activity, and as a guitarist I am worried about damaging my thumb, but we'll carry on for now. But it is really quite uncomfortable. I've put masking tape over the edges. Hopefully that'll make it a bit more comfortable to hold. I wish there was a way of clamping the chisel down though. This is attached to my bench and it needs to be, otherwise it would just fly around all over the place. Yeah, it's really bugging me having to hold this chisel in place. It's uncomfortable. This chisel is magnetised. I don't know whether it's this process that has magnetised it, constantly scraping in a single direction, or whether it was magnetised already, but I don't think that matters particularly, but it's all the filings are sticking to it. Just while I'm having a quick breather, this is the chisel I tried originally and pretty much gave up trying to sharpen it. And now that I've got actual digital bevel, I thought I'd check what the bevel on this was, which is largely the factory bevel. All I did was get the grind marks out and give it a good polish in sharpening it. And the factory bevel was 26 degrees. Hence putting it on here, it was only touching the rear of the thing, and because this is such a large area, I think it would have been very difficult to get that 26 degree bevel down to 25 degrees. There was an argument that I should have gone straight for a 30 degree bevel, but I think the 30 degree bevel, the idea there is it's a micro bevel on the end, it's not the overall bevel. Trying to put a micro bevel on something which still has the original grind on it, I think is a bad idea, because you just end up with a serrated edge. But I think we've got a similar issue here. It's a bit late now. I should have checked what the bevel was on this initially, but we are clearly changing this by a degree or two, and that's why it's taking so long. But hopefully once we're at 25 degrees, things will go a lot easier, and we'll be able to put the 30-degree bevel on. I'm having to use my fingers to hold it. My thumbs become too painful. This is not ideal because clearly my fingers are even more valuable to me as a guitarist than my thumb, but actually let me go back to trying to use a block of wood to hold it. At least then I might be able to use my thumb. A quick tip, it seems to be better to hold the thing here and press here rather than here. If you press here, the whole thing just seems, I don't know, it doesn't slide so well. If you press here, it seems to contact better with the blade. But be very careful. If you've got your finger here, be very careful not to bring the blade too far back. Otherwise, you'll end up catching the corner of the chisel, as I just did. Now, I didn't break the surface of the skin, but yeah, it's you've got to be careful. I've got quite tough guitarist's fingers, so maybe that saved me. But there is a mark there where the corner of the chisel hit me. So just be careful that you keep well within the middle of the scraper. Oh yeah, I'm not using gloves now because I just couldn't get enough grip with the gloves. This is a very physical process, and with the gloves everything just slides and you can't keep a grip on the chisel. So I've been doing it barehanded. It's awkward. I'm nearly there. I think that might be. No, I can still see a very faint line of polish on the end, which means I haven't got down to the tip of the chisel yet. But we're nearly there. This is after an hour with a quarter of an hour break, so about 3/4 of an hour work. That's about an hour of sharpening. I can't feel a burr on the edge. There is a burr at each end on the sides, but probably because of the fact you're sharpening across the blade, there is no burr at the end. It is an accurate 25 degrees, so can you see that? There we go. So I'm happy with that. Right, full disclosure, I was actually given, they sent me a 100 grit plate, which I could have used and saved a lot of time, but then I wouldn't be reviewing the device as it was originally sold. There is another plate for 450 grit, which comes with it, which I will now use, and we'll see what sort of finish that gives me. I may go and use some of the finer plates that I've been sent to see what sort of surface that gives me. But of course then I'm not reviewing the original product as sold. You can see the amount of wear I've had on the carriage. This obviously is the filings off the chisel, but we've been getting a lot of wear here. I don't think it's riding on the PTFE strip. I'm trying to press down, but something's rubbing, and I think that's why it's so difficult to move. It isn't sliding smoothly. I'm now going to switch to the 450 grit that comes with this. I've never actually used this because in the previous video I just gave up. But we'll see how we get on with the 450 grit. Still on the 25 degree bevel. Just see if we can get a better surface. So instructions: pull it back, present the chisel, and then press forward. That certainly feels a lot smoother. And I'm hoping that's all you need. Although, it still looks like the sort of finish you'd get in a shop rather than a properly polished chisel. I'm not expecting much from the 450 grit plate because, well, I usually sharpen to 8000 grit, but Let's see how good a surface we can get. That, I think, is the surface you get with the 450 grit. I don't think I need to go any further. That was a lot quicker. I think the key to this is you have to have a perfect bevel to begin with, otherwise you're going to have a lot of work. Now, I am going to put a 30-degree bevel on this, but I'm going to go up to 1,000. Well, I've got a 600 grit plate, which I guess I'll use. I'm going to put a 600 plate on it and a 1,000 grit plate on it, and to see what sort of surface they give, and then I'll do the 30-degree bevel. But just bear in mind that the 600 plate and the 1,000 plate don't come with the basic unit. 600. Is that doing anything? Yeah, you see, now I'm feeling a burr. I was sent a deburring plate, but that's not part of the original kit. You just get the 220, yeah, 220 and 450. So while I'm using the 1,000 plate, I'll just try and take the burr off with that, just by doing that basically. That's better. That's removed the burr. It feels sharp, but it's nowhere near the finish I'd normally get, because I'd normally go onto an 8,000 grit stone and then I'd strop it. Let's put the plate back on. I'm not sure I've got rid of some of the scratches from previous. That's the 1,000 grit finish, but I think I've still got scratches from the previous grits. It does feel sharp, and I guess because you're doing it in that direction, you haven't got the serrations on the edge where the grooves are, so I guess you don't necessarily need to have a polish on by going this way across the blade. I normally would just want a 25-degree bevel, but I am going to go and put a 30-degree micro bevel on that now, and just see how long that takes. I've gone back to the 220. I think this is going to go a lot quicker because I'm not having to. Well, I am having to create the bevel, but I'm only going to be creating like a 1mm bevel. So this should be a lot quicker. So I'll try not to put an edit in. Right, so pull it back, present the chisel, press forward. There we go, that's taken a fair bit of material away, I think. Certainly a lot of filings there. And there's quite, that's a very severe burr. So I guess I just let's just do that again now that I've got rid of the burr. Again, looks like quite a bit of material's been taken away there. Can you see the burr on the end of that? That is quite a major burr. Yeah, the burr's on the other side now. I think we'll go to the 450. Yeah, get rid of the burr. Okay, I think that is now as sharp as it will go with 250, 450. That's probably sharp enough for most people, but it's certainly nowhere near a polish. I'll do the 600 and 1000. Yeah, but 1000. Yeah, and we've got the burr again. Well, I ended up with, I guess, a sharp chisel. There's still a lot of scratches in it. I think my micro bevel extends back to about here. So that much is 30 degrees and the rest of it is 25. The problem is it took an hour and a half to get there. I had a quarter of an hour break in the middle to cool down. That's an hour and a half of work on one chisel, which the thing is, once you've got a precise 25 degree bevel, it's very quick to put a micro bevel on this. It's just a couple of sweeps and you're there. It's getting that 25 degree bevel on it in the first place. If it's even slightly more than 25 degrees, then this isn't touching the edge of the blade, it's touching the rear, and you've got to take material off the entire bevel and get down, and that's what takes a while to do. And yes, putting a 30 degree bevel on it is then fairly quick, but there's only so many times you can put a micro bevel on a chisel at 30 degrees before the 30 degree angle is the entire bevel again. So you probably would have to go back and reset it to 25 degrees so that you can put the 30 degree bevel back on, and that 25 degrees is going to take you a while. My thumb is very sore. Holding the chisel in place so it isn't moving, you have to apply a fair bit of pressure. It talks about light pressure in the instructions, but if yes, you can apply light pressure on the carriage, but applying light pressure to the chisel just doesn't work. The chisel moves. So it's quite physical. Hopefully my thumb's a bit numb, but hopefully that's not going to affect. I don't really use my thumb for playing guitar, not my left thumb. So I'm hopefully I'm okay, but the end of my thumb is really numb. It's very physical. So it took about an hour to get the 25 degree bevel, and after that, so something's not right with the carriage. It's rubbing. There's metal coming away, and the edges of the carriage are quite sharp. I had to change how I was using it, otherwise I would have got a blister on the palm of my hand. I guess for putting a micro bevel on, it's quick. Am I going to be using this? For my planes, I'm going to stick with a 25 degree bevel, and I don't think I am going to be using this, but make up your own mind. I've tried to present this as honestly as I can. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Make up your own mind. See you later. Bye.